Have you ever felt invisible, ignored, disrespected by someone in a position of power, even for a moment? We've all been there. But what if that moment of disrespect escalated into a physical assault, 30,000 feet in the air? This isn't just a story about a rude flight attendant. This is the story of Kimberly Vance, a senior crew member on Airline Airlines who made the biggest mistake of her life. She slapped a passenger. But this was no ordinary passenger. This was Dr. Evelyn Hayes, a woman who looked unassuming in her simple clothes, but who held the fate of the entire airline and Kimberly's career in the palm of her hand. Stay tuned to find out what happens when a single act of arrogance and prejudice collides with the ultimate authority, triggering a chain of events that would rock an entire corporation to its core. The air inside the terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport hummed with the familiar, organized chaos of 1,000 intersecting journeys. It was a symphony of rolling luggage, muffled announcements, and the low murmur of conversations in a dozen languages. For most, it was a place of transit, a sterile corridor between one life and another. For Dr. Evelyn Hayes, it was a research facility. At 54, Evelyn possessed a quiet intensity that often caused people to underestimate her. Today, she had made a concerted effort to be forgettable. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back into a simple, unadorned bun. She wore no makeup, and a pair of simple, functional glasses rested on her nose. Her attire consisted of comfortable charcoal gray sweatpants, a well-worn Howard University sweatshirt, and practical sneakers that had seen better days. To any casual observer, she was just another traveler, perhaps a professor or a grandmother heading west to see family. No one would guess she was the newly appointed chief executive officer of Airline Airlines, the very company whose aircraft she was about to board. Evelyn had a philosophy forged in the crucibles of both the boardroom and the engineering labs where she'd started her career. You can't understand a machine unless you're willing to get your hands dirty. An airline was the most complex of machines, a delicate interplay of logistics, engineering, finance, and most importantly, human experience. The spreadsheets and quarterly reports that landed on her mahogany desk in Chicago could tell her about fuel costs and profit margins, but they couldn't tell her how a passenger felt when they flew Airwing. They couldn't tell her if the smiles of the cabin crew were genuine, if the coffee was perpetually lukewarm, or if the promise of service with a soul was just a hollow marketing slogan. So twice a quarter, she flew incognito. She booked the cheapest economy ticket she could find, waited in every line, and subjected herself to the complete, unvarnished passenger experience. Her executive assistant, a sharp young man named Ben Carter, was the only one who knew. He'd booked her this seat, 24B, a middle seat on flight AW715 to Los Angeles, a 6-hour flight, the perfect petri dish for her experiment. As she shuffled forward in the Zone 4 boarding line, she observed. She saw a gate agent handle a flustered family with remarkable patience, kneeling to speak to a crying child while reassuring the parents about their car seat, a point in the positive column. She also saw another agent snap at an elderly man who was having trouble scanning his boarding pass, her voice laced with an impatience that curdled the air, a significant negative. On board, the atmosphere was a familiar mix of recycled air and faint disinfectant. Evelyn found her seat, flanked by a young student engrossed in his phone, and a woman who had already fallen asleep against the window. She stowed her single, small backpack under the seat in front of her and settled in, her senses on high alert. This was Kimberly Vance's domain. At 48, Kimberly was a veteran of the skies. She had been with Airwing for over 25 years, starting when the uniforms were boxier and the rules more rigid. She wore her seniority like a shield and a weapon. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a helmet of improbable stability, and her makeup was a mask of professional, if severe, perfection. She moved through the cabin with an air of ownership, her eyes scanning for infractions, a bag improperly stowed, a seatbelt not yet fastened. Evelyn watched her interact with the passengers. There was no warmth, only a chilly efficiency. A young man asked for help lifting his bag into the overhead bin, and Kimberly gestured vaguely toward a male passenger. "Perhaps he can help you," she said, her tone implying he was an inconvenience. She spoke to a non-native English speaker with exaggeratedly slow and loud words, a condescending display that made Evelyn's jaw tighten. This was precisely the kind of systemic rot she was looking for, the slow erosion of dignity that no customer satisfaction survey could ever truly capture. The flight attendant assigned to Evelyn's section was a young woman named Jessica, whose name tag was slightly askew. She seemed nervous but earnest, offering a genuine smile to each passenger she greeted. When she got to Evelyn's row, she made eye contact. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice warm. "Let me know if you need anything at all during the flight." Evelyn smiled back. "Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that." A few minutes later, Kimberly's voice, sharp and imperious, cut through the cabin from the front galley. "Jessica, stop chatting and get these pre-departure checks done. We're on a schedule." Jessica's face flushed with embarrassment. She gave Evelyn a quick, apologetic glance before hurrying toward the front. Evelyn made a mental note. Kimberly wasn't just a poor service provider, she was a bully to her own team. The problem was deeper than she thought. As the plane taxied to the runway, Evelyn felt a familiar sense of detachment. She wasn't Evelyn Hayes, CEO. She was passenger 24B, a silent observer gathering data. The engine spooled up with a deep, powerful roar, and the aircraft accelerated, pressing her back into the thin cushioning of her seat. They lifted off into the hazy New York sky, climbing above the sprawling metropolis. Below, the world shrank into a map of itself. Above, inside this metal tube, a microcosm of society was about to play out, and Dr. Evelyn Hayes had a front-row, middle-seat view. The calm for now held, but the air was charged and the storm was gathering just beyond the horizon. The first 2 hours of the flight passed with routine monotony. The seatbelt sign pinged off, and the cabin crew began their choreographed dance of beverage service. Jessica, pushing the cart from the back, was patient and kind, refilling water bottles and offering extra pretzels with a smile. Kimberly worked the front of the economy cabin, her movements brisk and economical. She dispensed cans of soda and miniature bottles of wine with the enthusiasm of a metronome, precise, repetitive, and utterly devoid of feeling. Evelyn had been working quietly on her tablet, reviewing passenger complaint logs from the past quarter. The irony was not lost on her. The data was a sea of anonymous grievances. Rude flight attendant, unhelpful staff, felt dismissed. These were the ghosts she was here to hunt, and she had found a living, breathing embodiment of them in Kimberly Vance. Around the third hour, as the plains of the Midwest scrolled by far below, Evelyn felt a chill. The cabin air was biting, and the thin, standard-issue blanket she'd found on her seat offered little comfort. She was trying to focus on a particularly damning report about in-flight crew conflicts, but the cold was a persistent distraction. She saw Jessica attending to a passenger a few rows back and waited patiently for her to finish. Just as Jessica turned, Kimberly emerged from the front galley, her face a thunderous mask. She intercepted Jessica mid-aisle. "Did you finish the collection in Section 1? Kimberly's voice was a harsh whisper that carried farther than she intended. "Almost," Jessica replied, her voice faltering. "I was just getting this gentleman a coffee. The manifest says he's silver tier, not platinum. He can wait." "Follow the procedure," Kimberly snapped before turning her attention to the rest of the cabin, her eyes scanning for any new sign of disorder. Her gaze fell on Evelyn. Evelyn decided this was a perfect opportunity to test the system. She pressed the call button above her head. The light chimed and illuminated. She waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. Jessica was clearly occupied by Kimberly's new instructions. After 3 minutes, Evelyn pressed it again. Finally, Kimberly began walking down the aisle, her stride heavy with irritation. She arrived at row 24 and looked down at Evelyn, not with an expression of service, but of accusation. "Yes?" The word was clipped. "Hello," Evelyn said, her voice calm and even. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm feeling quite cold. I was wondering if it might be possible to get a second blanket, if you have any extras." Kimberly's eyes did a slow, deliberate sweep of Evelyn's person, lingering for a fraction of a second on the faded university logo of her sweatshirt. It was a look Evelyn knew all too well, a dismissive appraisal that calculated her worth and found it wanting. "We distribute 1 blanket per passenger," Kimberly stated, as if reciting scripture. There are no extras. I see, Evelyn replied, maintaining her polite tone. Perhaps you could check. Sometimes there are a few left over from passengers who don't take one. It was a simple, reasonable request. A flicker of something ugly crossed Kimberly's face. It was the anger of someone whose absolute authority had been questioned, however gently. I said, she enunciated slowly, her voice dropping, we don't have any. The cabin temperature is regulated automatically. Perhaps you should have worn a jacket. The condescension was palpable. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably, their attention drawn from their movies and books. The student next to Evelyn pulled out one of his earbuds. Evelyn did not raise her voice. She did not get angry. She simply held Kimberly's gaze. That wasn't a very helpful response. I'm a paying customer, and I'm asking for a simple service. Could you please just check for me? That's all I'm asking. This quiet persistence was, to Kimberly, an act of open rebellion. In her world, passengers were to be managed, not engaged with. This woman, with her calm demeanor and direct gaze, was challenging her control. Listen to me, Kimberly hissed, leaning closer, her voice now a low, menacing snarl that was meant for Evelyn alone, but was audible to the entire row. I have been doing this job for 25 years. I know what we have on board. We have no more blankets. Now I am very busy, and I suggest you turn off your light and stop being a problem. The word problem hung in the air. Evelyn felt a familiar weariness wash over her, followed by a steely resolve. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The cancerous cell she needed to excise. Your attitude is the only problem here, Evelyn said, her voice still level, but now edged with an authority that seemed to come from nowhere. Your rudeness to me and to your colleague Jessica is unacceptable. I will be filing a formal complaint and will require your name and employee number. Kimberly's face went from pale with anger to a deep mottled red. The audacity of this woman in her cheap sweats threatening her was beyond comprehension. All the frustrations of her day, of her career, of her life, seemed to coalesce into a single point of white-hot rage. She saw not a customer, but an obstacle, an inferior who needed to be put in her place. You will be filing nothing, Kimberly spat. Her training, her professionalism, her decades of experience vanished in an instant, replaced by raw, unfiltered prejudice and fury. You people are always looking for a handout, always causing trouble. The phrase, you people, struck Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. Before she could even process the venom in those words, Kimberly's hand shot out. Crack. The sound was shockingly loud in the confined space of the cabin. Kimberly's open palm connected squarely with Evelyn's cheek. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a hard, stinging slap born of pure rage. A collective gasp went through the rows. The student next to Evelyn stared, his mouth agape. The woman by the window was jolted awake. Across the aisle, a man named David Chen, a tech blogger on his way to a conference, had already, almost instinctively, lifted his phone and hit record the moment he heard the argument escalate. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. The only sound was the omnipresent hum of the jet engines. Evelyn's head was turned slightly from the impact, a red mark already blooming on her dark skin. She didn't cry out. She didn't retaliate. She slowly turned her head back to face Kimberly, and her eyes, clear and cold and unwavering, held a depth of fury and disappointment that was more terrifying than any shout. Kimberly stood frozen, her hands still slightly raised, her chest heaving. The shock of her own action began to dawn on her, but it was quickly being replaced by a frantic, defensive justification in her mind. She provoked me. She was unruly. It was self-defense. Jessica rushed over, her face a mask of horror. Kimberly, oh my God, what did you do? But Kimberly couldn't hear her. She was locked in the gaze of the woman in seat 24B, a woman whose calm was now the most menacing thing she had ever encountered. In that moment, Kimberly Vance had not just slapped a passenger, she had sealed her own fate at 35,000 feet. The slap had broken a spell. The cabin, once a space of private worlds and shared transit, was now a single, horrified entity. Every eye was fixed on row 24. David Chen's phone was still recording, The small red light, a silent, damning witness. Kimberly, realizing what she'd done in front of a plane full of witnesses, immediately shifted into self-preservation mode. Her panic manifested as aggression. She pointed a trembling finger at Evelyn. This passenger became aggressive. She was threatening me. She is a security risk. Evelyn remained seated, her hand now resting on her stinging cheek. She looked not at Kimberly, but at the horrified face of Jessica. Jessica, she said, her voice steady and clear, cutting through Kimberly's frantic accusations. Please go and inform the captain of what just occurred. Tell him a member of his cabin crew has physically assaulted a passenger. Don't you listen to her, Kimberly shrieked, her composure completely shattered. She's the one who is out of control. I need her restrained. The student next to Evelyn, a young man named Leo, finally found his voice. That's a lie. I saw the whole thing. She just asked for a blanket. You slapped her for no reason. I saw it too. A woman from the row behind called out. The flight attendant was completely out of line. David Chen spoke up, his voice firm, his phone still held steady. I have the entire incident on video, including the part where you used racist language before you struck her. Kimberly's face went ashen. The word video was a death knell to her fabricated story. Her eyes darted around wildly, seeing only condemnation on the faces of the passengers. She was cornered. Jessica, pale and shaking, nodded at Evelyn and quickly made her way to the cockpit. The minutes that followed were thick with a suffocating tension. Kimberly stood frozen in the aisle, a pariah in her own uniform. She refused to make eye contact with anyone, staring blankly at the overhead compartments as if they held the answers to her unraveling life. Presently, the cockpit door opened and Captain Robert Miller emerged. He was a man in his late 50s with a commanding presence and a face that spoke of years of calm professionalism. He assessed the scene, his eyes taking in Kimberly's panicked state, the passengers staring openly, and the quiet, composed woman in seat 24B with a red mark on her cheek. Ma'am, I'm Captain Miller, he said, addressing Evelyn with a tone of practiced de-escalation. I understand there's been a disturbance. Your senior flight attendant, Miss Vance, just assaulted me, Evelyn stated simply. There was no hysteria in her voice, only fact. She slapped me across the face after I made a simple request, and she became verbally abusive. Captain Miller looked at Kimberly. Is this true? She was belligerent, Captain, Kimberly insisted, her voice rising. She was refusing to follow crew instructions. I felt threatened. That is false, Captain, David Chen interjected, lowering his phone. And I have video evidence to prove it. She was calm, and your crew member was the aggressor from the start. The captain's expression hardened. Video evidence was irrefutable. His primary responsibility was the safety and security of the flight, and that included protecting passengers from his own crew. Kimberly, he said, his voice low and firm, go to the rear galley and stay there until we land. Do not interact with any more passengers. Jessica will take over your duties. That's an order. Tears of rage and humiliation welled in Kimberly's eyes. To be dismissed like a child in front of the entire cabin was the ultimate indignity. She shot a look of pure hatred at Evelyn before turning and stalking down the aisle, her walk of shame broadcast to dozens of smartphones. Captain Miller knelt in the aisle next to Evelyn's seat. Ma'am, on behalf of Airline Airlines, I am profoundly sorry for what just happened. This is an unacceptable breach of conduct. Are you injured? Do you require medical attention? My cheek is stinging, but I don't need a doctor, Evelyn said. What I require is assurance that this will be handled with the gravity it deserves upon landing. Absolutely, the captain assured her. I have already radioed ahead. We will be met by ground security and airline officials at the gate in Los Angeles. The authorities will be notified. Ms. Vance will be taken into their custody for questioning. Evelyn nodded slowly. Thank you, Captain. He looked at her, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. There was something about this woman's composure, her articulate and unwavering command of the situation, that set her apart. She was not behaving like a typical victim, shocked, tearful, or demanding. She was behaving like an executive assessing a catastrophic system failure. He chalked it up to personal fortitude and returned to the cockpit. For the remainder of the flight, a surreal calm settled over the aircraft. Jessica, though visibly shaken, performed her duties with a newfound diligence. her kindness a stark contrast to Kimberly's earlier hostility. She brought Evelyn a bag of ice for her cheek and a bottle of premium water from first class, apologizing profusely in a hushed whisper. "It's not your fault, Jessica," Evelyn told her quietly. "You handled yourself professionally under difficult circumstances." As the plane began its final descent into LAX, the familiar sights of the sprawling city filling the windows, Evelyn felt a cold sense of purpose. Her fact-finding mission was over. Now her work as CEO was about to begin. Kimberly Vance believed her problem was landing and facing airport police. She had no idea that her true judgment was waiting not in a police station, but in the corporate headquarters she represented. She thought she was at the end of a very bad flight. In reality, she was at the beginning of the end of her career. The descent into LAX was merely a prelude to a much harder, much faster fall from grace. The moment Flight AW715 connected with the jet bridge at LAX, the cabin door was opened to reveal not just the usual ground staff, but two uniformed airport police officers and a stern-looking man in a suit. Daniel Portis, the West Coast Regional Manager for Orwing. Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We ask that you remain in your seats until airport authorities have resolved a situation on board." All eyes turned to row 24. The officers, briefed by the captain, moved down the aisle. Kimberly, who had been brought from the rear galley, stood with a look of defiant victimhood. She truly believed she was about to be vindicated, that the passenger in 24B would be the one led away in handcuffs. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," one officer said, his voice neutral. He was looking directly at Kimberly, her face crumpled in disbelief. "Me? But she was the one who was unruly." "We'll take statements from everyone involved, ma'am," the officer said patiently. "Right now, you need to come with us." As they escorted a protesting Kimberly off the plane, Daniel Portis approached Evelyn's row. He had been told a passenger was assaulted, but he had not been given a name. He saw the red mark on her cheek, and his professional face was a mask of concern. "Ma'am, I am Daniel Portis, the regional manager. I am so terribly sorry for the horrific experience you've had on our airline. We will, of course, be refunding your ticket in full and offering you a voucher for future travel." Evelyn held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "Daniel, that won't be necessary. What I need from you is a secure, private room. I need you to retrieve all official reports from Captain Miller. I also need you to get sworn statements from at least 5 passengers who witnessed the event, including the gentleman here," she said, nodding to David Chen. "And I need a secure transfer of the video he took. Do not let it leave your sight." Daniel Portis was taken aback by her tone. It was not the voice of a disgruntled passenger. It was the voice of a commander issuing orders. He blinked, confused. Of course, ma'am. We can certainly do that. May I have your name for the report?" Evelyn looked him directly in the eye. "Dr. Evelyn Hayes." Recognition did not dawn. To the operational staff, the new CEO was still just a name in a corporate memo, a photograph on the company's internal website that few had bothered to study. This was exactly as she'd planned. "Okay, Ms. Hayes," he said, fumbling for a pen. "We'll get right on that." "It's Dr. Hayes," she corrected him calmly, "and I'll be in your office in Terminal 2 in 1 hour. I expect you to have everything ready." She stood, gathered her small backpack, and nodded to David Chen and the other passengers who had spoken up. "Thank you for your integrity," she said to them, before walking off the plane, leaving a very bewildered Daniel Portis in her wake. While Portis scrambled to follow her instructions, Evelyn was in a quiet airport lounge, her phone to her ear. She wasn't speaking to a lawyer. She was speaking to Richard Sterling, the chairman of the board of Orwing Airlines. "Yes, Richard, a full-force slap, in front of at least 100 passengers," she was saying, her voice low and tight with controlled fury. "The video is apparently damning. The racism was overt. No one knows who I am yet. I want it that way. I want to see the unvarnished process. I want to see how Daniel Portis handles this without knowing his job is on the line." On the other end of the line in Chicago, Richard Sterling, a man not easily shocked, was speechless. "My God, Evelyn, are you all right?" "I'll survive," she said dismissively. "What may not survive is the culture of this company if we don't cauterize this wound right now. I'm calling an emergency board meeting via video conference for 8 a.m. Central Time tomorrow. I want the heads of HR, legal, and in-flight operations there. No exceptions. Consider it done, Richard said. What's your next move? I'm about to see what our standard procedure for a disaster like this looks like, Evelyn said, her eyes glinting. And then I'm going to rewrite it from the ground up. An hour later, Evelyn sat in a sterile, windowless office in the Aura Wing operational hub at LAX. Daniel Portis was sweating, despite the cool air conditioning. He had the captain's report, several handwritten statements from passengers, and a copy of David Chen's video on a tablet. It's even worse than I imagined, Portis stammered after showing her the video. Her language, the aggression, it's indefensible. Ms. Vance has been with us for 25 years. I can't understand. 25 years is a long time to let a problem fester, Daniel, Evelyn said, her gaze fixed on the tablet. She watched the video again, this time observing the background, the reactions of other passengers, the hesitation of Jessica. It was a complete picture of a cultural failure. Her employment will, of course, be terminated immediately, Portis said quickly, eager to show he was taking charge. We'll issue a formal apology, and we'll offer you a significant compensation package, Dr. Hayes, for the distress this has caused. Evelyn looked up from the tablet, her expression unreadable. You'll do nothing of the sort, Daniel. You will not terminate her. Not yet. You will place her on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. You will issue no statement. You will offer me no compensation. You will treat this exactly as you would if I were any other passenger. Portis was utterly baffled. But why? The evidence is clear. We need to get ahead of this, especially with that video out there. I want to see the system work, or fail, Evelyn said. I want to know if our HR department would conduct a thorough investigation or just fire a long-term employee based on a viral video. I want to see if our legal team's first instinct is to protect the company or to do what is right. Now I have a flight to catch. Another flight? Portis asked, confused. My connecting flight. To Chicago, Evelyn said, standing up. Our corporate headquarters. I have a meeting in the morning. She walked to the door, then paused and turned back to him. Daniel, not a word of my identity to anyone. As far as the system is concerned, I am Jane Doe, passenger 24B, the victim of your employee's assault. Is that understood? Yes, of course, he stammered. As Evelyn walked out, leaving the bewildered manager behind, she felt the last vestiges of being a passenger shed away. The mask was coming off. Back in an interrogation room, Kimberly Vance was giving her statement to the police, weaving a tale of a difficult, aggressive passenger, confident that her seniority and her union would protect her. She had no idea that the woman she had assaulted was now flying on the company's private jet back to headquarters, preparing not just to end her career, but to dismantle the very culture of entitlement that had allowed a Kimberly Vance to flourish for 25 years. The gambit was in play and the board was about to be put in check. The Aura Wing Airline's corporate headquarters was a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Chicago, a monument of glass and steel designed to project an image of modern efficiency and strength. But on this Wednesday morning, a palpable tension radiated from the 48th floor executive boardroom. The emergency meeting Evelyn had called was about to begin. The heads of departments filed in, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. They had been summoned with no explanation other than a critical in-flight incident. Sarah Jenkins, the polished and formidable head of human resources, took her seat, followed by the company's chief legal counsel, a cautious man named Mark Riley, and the flustered vice president of in-flight operations, Jeffrey Lang. Richard Sterling, the chairman, sat at the head of the table, his expression grim. The final seat, belonging to the CEO, remained empty. Richard, any idea what this is about? Jeffrey Lang asked, adjusting his tie. My West Coast people are being tight-lipped about an incident on AW715, but they said it was being handled. Before Richard could answer, the conference room doors opened. In walked Dr. Evelyn Hayes. But this was not the woman from the flight. Gone were the sweatpants and the university sweatshirt. Today she wore a sharply tailored navy blue pantsuit, her hair was styled impeccably, and her eyes, no longer hidden behind simple glasses, were sharp and focused. An air of absolute command surrounded her. The only thing that marred the picture of corporate power was the faint but still visible bruise on her right cheek. A stunned silence fell over the room as they all saw it. "Good morning," Evelyn began, her voice as crisp as the morning air. She remained standing. "Yesterday, I flew from JFK to LAX on one of our aircraft. I was in seat 24B. I did so to gain an unfiltered perspective on the passenger experience we provide. And I have to say, the experience was illuminating." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Jeffrey," she said, her eyes locking on the VP of in-flight operations. "Are you aware that a senior flight attendant, Kimberly Vance, physically assaulted a passenger on that flight?" Jeffrey paled. "Yes, I was briefed this morning. A deeply regrettable incident. The employee has been placed on leave, and we are launching a full investigation." "An investigation into what exactly?" Evelyn cut in, her voice dangerously soft. "Into whether the video of the assault is authentic? Into whether the dozen passenger witness statements are all lying? Or are you investigating to find a way to mitigate the damage and make this go away quietly?" She gestured to the large screen at the end of the room. "Let's not waste time." She pressed a button on the console, and David Chen's video filled the screen. The room watched in horrified silence. They saw Evelyn's calm request. They heard Kimberly's condescending refusal. They heard the ugly racist "you people," and they saw in visceral, undeniable clarity the slap. They saw the shock, they heard the gasps, and they saw the cold, controlled fury in their new CEO's eyes. When the video ended, the silence was deafening. Sarah Jenkins from HR looked as if she were about to be physically ill. Mark Riley, the lawyer, was already scribbling frantic notes. "That passenger," Evelyn said, gesturing to her own bruised cheek, "was me. So let me rephrase. Are you investigating why one of our employees felt entitled enough to strike your chief executive officer? Or does it only matter because it was me?" No one dared to answer. "This isn't about me," Evelyn continued, her voice rising with controlled passion. "If she had done this to anyone else, would we be having this emergency board meeting? Or would it be a case file on your desk, Sarah, to be handled by a junior associate? Would your first call, Mark, be to our PR firm to spin the story?" She paced the length of the table. "I have read Ms. Vance's file. 17 passenger complaints against her in the last 5 years alone. Rude, condescending, aggressive, discriminatory. 17 red flags. And what was the disciplinary action? A note in her file, a verbal warning, a mandatory online refresher course on customer sensitivity that she probably clicked through in 15 minutes. We didn't solve a problem. We enabled it. We nurtured it. For 25 years. She stopped and looked at each executive in turn. This is the result of a culture of apathy, a culture where seniority is mistaken for royalty, and where employees are not held to the standards we print in glossy brochures. This cancer didn't start with Kimberly Vance. It ends with her. At that moment, Evelyn's assistant, Ben Carter, entered the room and whispered something in her ear. Evelyn nodded. "Speaking of which," she said, turning back to the group, "Ms. Vance is in the waiting area. She believes she is here for a standard HR debriefing. Sarah, please bring her in." Sarah Jenkins, looking terrified, scurried out of the room. A minute later, she returned, followed by Kimberly Vance. Kimberly had dressed for the occasion in her finest civilian clothes, a confident smirk on her face. She was ready to play the victim, to talk about the stress of the job and the aggressive passenger who had pushed her to the edge. She scanned the room of powerful executives, her eyes wide with the importance of it all. Then her gaze fell upon the woman standing at the head of the table. Recognition dawned, and every drop of color drained from Kimberly's face. The confident smirk evaporated, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. She saw the power suit, the commanding presence, and the faint bruise on the cheek of the CEO. And she saw that it was the same face from seat 24B. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her carefully constructed reality shattered into a million pieces. "Ms. Vance," Evelyn said, her voice devoid of all emotion, "it's good to see you again, though I believe our last encounter was a bit more impactful." Kimberly swayed on her feet, grabbing the back of a chair for support. You're she stammered. I am Dr. Evelyn Hayes, your boss, Evelyn finished for her. And as of this moment, you are no longer an employee of Airline Airlines. You are being terminated for cause, effective immediately. Your severance is void. Your flight benefits are revoked. Security will now escort you from the building to retrieve your personal effects from your locker. They will then escort you off the premises for the final time. Two uniformed security guards entered the room, standing on either side of the door. Tears finally streamed down Kimberly's face, tears not of remorse, but of self-pity. Please, she begged, her voice a pathetic whisper. 25 years. It was one mistake. I was having a bad day. You did not have a bad day, Ms. Vance, Evelyn countered, her voice like ice. You revealed your true character. You assaulted a customer. You were racist, abusive, and a disgrace to the uniform you wore. The mistake was ours for allowing someone like you to represent this company for so long. That is a mistake I am here to rectify. Now please leave my boardroom. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken, Kimberly Vance allowed the security guards to lead her out of the room. The sound of her quiet sobbing faded down the hall. The reckoning was complete. But for Evelyn Hayes, the real work was just beginning. The judgment had been passed, but now the entire system had to be rebuilt. The termination of Kimberly Vance was not an end. It was a declaration of war. A war on complacency, on prejudice, and on the quiet corrosion of corporate values. The silence in the boardroom after Kimberly's departure was heavy, filled with the unspoken fear of executives who suddenly realized their own positions were not as secure as they had believed. Evelyn let the silence hang for a long moment before she spoke, her tone shifting from the ice of judgment to the fire of creation. What you have all just witnessed is not a solution, she announced, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces. It's a symptom treatment. We have removed one tumor, but the disease remains in the body of this company. Our job, starting right now, is to cure the disease. She turned to Jeffrey Lang, the VP of In-Flight Operations. Jeffrey, your department's performance review system is a failure. It rewards seniority over merit and ignores chronic behavioral problems. I want a proposal on my desk by Monday for a new top-to-bottom system. I want 360-degree reviews where flight attendants are evaluated not just by their supervisors, but by their peers. I want a system where passenger complaints are weighted and tracked, and where patterns of negative behavior trigger mandatory in-person retraining and counseling, not an email with a link to a webinar. Jeffrey, who moments before looked like he might be fired, now saw a lifeline. He straightened up, grabbing a notepad. Yes, Dr. Hayes, a peer review and weighted complaint system. I'll get my team on it immediately. Next, Evelyn turned to Sarah Jenkins. Sarah, HR is not just about compliance and mitigating legal risk. It is about nurturing our greatest asset, our people. The current sensitivity training is a joke, a box-ticking exercise. I am authorizing a budget increase of 30% for your department with one condition. You are to partner with a leading sociological research firm to design a new, immersive training program for all 15,000 of our public-facing employees. She began to pace again, energized by her own vision. I don't want PowerPoints. I want workshops. I want role-playing scenarios based on real incidents from our complaint logs. I want modules on de-escalation, unconscious bias, cultural competency, and empathy. This will be mandatory for everyone, from the newest hire to the most senior captain, and every single executive in this room, myself included, will be the first to take it. Sarah Jenkins' eyes widened at the mention of the budget increase and the scale of the project. That's ambitious, Dr. Hayes. It will be a massive logistical undertaking. Then I suggest you get started, Evelyn replied without missing a beat. I also want you to find the junior flight attendant from that flight, Jessica. Her file shows she's been with us for 8 months and has nothing but stellar passenger comments. She showed courage and integrity in a difficult situation. I want you to offer her a promotion to an in-flight training role where she can help teach new hires the right way to do things. We will reward the behavior we want to see. Finally, she looked at Mark Riley, the lawyer. Mark, I know your instinct is to prepare for the inevitable lawsuit from Ms. Vance for wrongful termination. You have my full support to fight it vigorously, but that's secondary. Your primary task is to draft a new passenger bill of rights for Wing Airlines, a public, legally binding commitment to our customers. It will outline their right to be treated with dignity and respect, their right to a safe and comfortable environment, and the clear, simple process for lodging a complaint that will be investigated by a new independent internal affairs body. And then she addressed the entire room. As for the video, it's going to go public. I've already spoken to the passenger who filmed it, David Chen. He has agreed to give us 24 hours before he posts it. We are not going to hide from this. We are not going to spin it. We are going to own it. We will issue a public statement, not from the PR department, but from me. I will detail what happened, I will apologize unreservedly, and I will announce every single one of the changes we have just discussed. We will turn the worst public relations disaster in this company's history into a testament to its newfound transparency and commitment to change. Over the next 24 hours, the glass tower on the Chicago River became a hive of activity. Departments that had operated in silos for years were forced into urgent, collaborative action. Jeffrey's team worked through the night, whiteboarding new review processes. Sarah's department was already on the phone with consulting firms. Mark's legal team was drafting language for the Bill of Rights. The next afternoon, just as David Chen's video began to spread like wildfire across social media, Wing Airlines released its own video. It was simple, direct, and shot in Evelyn's office. She sat at her desk, the bruise on her cheek still faintly visible, and spoke directly to the camera. She told the whole story. She didn't spare herself or her company. She apologized not in the hollow language of corporate speak, but with genuine contrition, and then she laid out her plan for reform, detailing the new training, the new review systems, and the new passenger Bill of Rights. The public reaction was unprecedented. What could have been a brand-destroying scandal became a story of accountability. Commentators were stunned by the CEO's candor. Customers, while appalled by the initial incident, expressed admiration for the company's swift and transparent response. The story shifted from airlines employs racist flight attendant to CEO goes undercover, exposes flaws, and radically reforms her own company. Inside the airline, the effect was seismic. The message was clear. The old ways were over. The culture of entitlement was dead. A new era of accountability, respect, and genuine service had begun. It was a painful, brutal, and public process. But from the ashes of Kimberly Vance's career, a new corporate culture was beginning to rise. 6 months passed. The seasons in Chicago turned from the crispness of autumn to the deep freeze of winter. The incident on Flight AW715 was no longer a trending topic, but its aftershocks had permanently altered the landscape of Wing Airlines. The changes Evelyn Hayes had set in motion were not just cosmetic. The Wing Cares initiative, as it was internally branded, was a tangible reality. The immersive training workshops, led by a combination of sociological experts and promoted senior staff like Jessica, were now a rite of passage for every employee. They were challenging, uncomfortable, and profoundly effective. Employees were forced to confront their own biases in realistic role-playing scenarios, learning to de-escalate conflict and lead with empathy. The new 360-degree review system sent ripples through the ranks. Seniority no longer guaranteed immunity. Crew members were now accountable to their peers, and those who consistently received negative feedback for attitude, for lack of teamwork, for poor customer interaction, were funneled into mandatory coaching programs. Several longtime employees, unable or unwilling to adapt to the new standard, quietly took early retirement. The company's culture was, by a process of attrition and education, healing itself. The Passenger Bill of Rights was displayed prominently at every check-in counter, on every seatback screen, and on the company's website. It became a powerful tool for both customers and employees, setting clear expectations for conduct on both sides. The independent internal affairs body investigated complaints with a new rigor, and its findings led to real consequences. Dr. Evelyn Hayes was on another flight, this time from Chicago to San Francisco. She hadn't flown incognito since that fateful day. Her identity was now too well known. She sat in a first-class seat, but she wasn't relaxing. As always, she was observing. She watched her crew interact with passengers. She saw a flight attendant patiently explain the entertainment system to an elderly woman 3 times with no hint of frustration. She witnessed the gate agent, under pressure from a delay, handle a crowd of anxious travelers with grace and clear communication. During the flight, a situation arose in the economy cabin. A young man who had clearly had too much to drink before boarding became loud and belligerent with a flight attendant named Michael. He was demanding more alcohol, using foul language, and refusing to listen to reason. Under the old system, this could have escalated badly. The flight attendant might have become confrontational, leading to a shouting match, restraints, and a police presence upon landing. But Evelyn watched as Michael handled it by the new playbook. He remained calm, his voice low and steady. He didn't argue or threaten. He empathized. "Sir, I can see you're having a good time, but we need to bring the volume down for the other passengers. I can't serve you any more alcohol right now, but I can get you some water or a coffee. We need to make sure you're hydrated and feeling good when we land in San Francisco." He was firm but respectful. He didn't treat the passenger like a criminal, but like a person who was making a mistake. Another flight attendant came over, not to intimidate, but to support. She engaged the man's friend in a quiet conversation, enlisting his help. Within minutes, the situation was diffused. The passenger calmed down, accepted a bottle of water, and eventually fell asleep. Evelyn leaned back in her seat and allowed herself a small, genuine smile. This was it. This was the change. It wasn't about one dramatic firing. It was about thousands of small, positive interactions. A new institutional instinct for decency. As for Kimberly Vance, her karma had been swift and unrelenting. Fired for cause from Eurowing, she found herself blacklisted in the commercial aviation industry. The viral video of her actions made her unemployable. Her union representation was half-hearted, given the irrefutable evidence. Her lawsuit for wrongful termination was summarily dismissed by a judge who called her conduct appalling. The last Evelyn had heard, Kimberly was working a retail job at a suburban mall, the skies she once ruled now just a view through a storefront window. When the flight landed in San Francisco, Captain Miller, the same captain from Flight AW715, came out of the cockpit. He had been one of the most vocal champions of the new training programs. He saw Evelyn and came over. "Dr. Hayes," he said with a warm smile, "good to have you with us today. Smooth flight." "Very smooth, Captain," Evelyn replied, "in every sense of the word. I was impressed with how Michael and his team handled that passenger in economy." The captain nodded, his expression proud. "That's the new standard. They did it by the book. Your book. It's making a real difference." As Evelyn deplaned, she paused on the jet bridge and looked back at the gleaming Eurowing aircraft. It was still just a machine of metal and wires. But the soul of the machine, its people, was being rebuilt piece by piece. Her work was far from over, but the journey was heading in the right direction. She had descended into the belly of her own company and faced its ugliest truths. In doing so, she had not only set a new course for Eurowing, but had also reaffirmed her own belief that true leadership isn't about sitting in the corner office, but about being willing to take a seat in the back row, to listen, to learn, and sometimes to take a slap in the face for the sake of making things right. The sky was not just a place of business, it was a place of limitless possibility, and she was determined to ensure her airline always flew toward a higher and better horizon. And there you have it, a story that peels back the curtain on the airline industry and exposes the shocking consequences of a single terrible decision. It's a powerful reminder that the person you dismiss today might just be the person who holds your entire future in their hands tomorrow. This wasn't just about a flight attendant getting fired. It was about how one leader, Dr. Evelyn Hayes, used a moment of personal humiliation to spark a revolution in corporate culture, proving that accountability and empathy are the most powerful forces for change. If this story of karmic justice and radical transformation resonated with you, please help us share it with the world. Hit that like button, share this video with your friends and family, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into stories that matter. What did you think of Evelyn's actions? Let us know in the comments below.